We welcome you all to this three session of the 10th Al Jazeera Forum. After 100 years of Sykes-Picot, the Middle East and the Orient witnesses struggle and scramble over so many different interests in the region. And with the crisis getting more intensified, looks like there is lack of a vision for the future to rid the region of its people from internal despotism and external subservience. And with the different discourse and the different priorities of the struggling forces, some call for combating terror. At the same time, they support despotic regimes under the pretext of keeping up the stability and protecting the stability and the security. And this was the opinion of our guest Andrei Fedorov from Russia in the previous session. Also, some stand on the side of the peoples to build democracies. So the question here is, where is the Middle East headed in light of the status quo? What are the visions for the region? What will happen? We will discuss this theme with our guests. We begin with Mr. Dr. Shafiq Al-Ghabra, political science professor at Kuwait University, an academic and Palestinian author. He established Jusur for training, and you're a member of the advisory committee for Fikr Forum. Of your works as a consequence of occupying Kuwait. And you have the floor, Dr. Shafiq. Please be punctual. You have 10 minutes or a little bit more. Well, this word more, I like it. I'm a generous lady, what can I say? But my latest book is Hayat غير آمنة, or Unsafe Life. You mentioned this book, but also this book is maybe my masterpiece. So I'm lucky to be the first panelist to speak in the light of a more general theme without getting into details of the scene in the Arab region. That is why I think that the Arab conflagration is still ongoing, while the differences between each situation and the other, between a society and its framework and the other, is also ongoing. Of course, Syria summarizes the Orient or the Levant intensively and in a clear way, but it is not the only one. We have disintegration problem which is still ongoing in the region. The more that any party wants to settle somehow, another party comes in the political sphere and military confrontation to push things in a different direction. So the Arab region is in turmoil. The Arabs are surrounded internally because of lack of progress for different reasons, such as lack of taking care of rights and no institutionalized state, and also they are surrounded and beleaguered from outside because of ongoing and open conflicts, tacitly, implicitly or explicitly. And we see what's happening in the Palestinian occupied territories and the Zionist intervention in our region, in addition to our dependency on the West. Also, another third element, which is the lack of projects which are attractive to the grassroots, which creates regional prospects. So the Arab region is intertwined in its good, in its bad, in its fall, in its rise, in its wars, and its peace. Even the Arab Spring, which spread to different Arab states, also the counter-revolution shows that clearly. Of course, the Arabs could have avoided extremism that is spreading in our societies nowadays had it been for some Arab countries have created justice for their citizens, including participation and transparency, to think more than their own border in terms of development, coordination, integration away from the security policies. So when there are projects connected to the state, it will keep the status quo, but still it is confined to that same state, and it will not really be spreading to the region. So the phenomenon we are facing in our region is a complex one, and the causes are different. Thousands of youth nowadays from Arab countries, from the Gulf to the ocean, are fighting on the side of Daesh or ISIS. So that shows the attractiveness that they have, in addition to the marginalization that pushes them to go in that direction that we see in the Arab world. So Daeshism is consuming the Arab region, consuming Iran, consuming the West, and it is indeed opening different fronts at the same time. All that in light of the absence of alternatives, and that gives it even more attractiveness and to withstand its position against countries that are trying to get rid of it. The majority of the Arab people, therefore, are committed to the maps that have been used through generations. So changing the borders is confined, where in North Iraq we see an exception to that at the Kurds. Also Yemen, north and south, because of the former division and war after war in Yemen and the failed state. Also division is not inevitable, neither in Syria nor in Iraq, meaning despite all the changes surrounding us since 2011, looks like the old maps are intact, yet they are shaky from a different point of view. At the same time, Tunisia and Egypt are not about to change their maps. Neither Saudi Arabia nor Kuwait nor Qatar want to change their maps. However, there's no end in sight for the current wars in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, and others. Nothing is as it used to be prior to those wars and uprisings and political movements. This Arab incubator has been broken because it is so rigid. Nobody can therefore restore the same containment without partnerships, without philosophy in its humanitarian dimension, and without accountability and transparency. So all these are barriers. So this kind of state, as it is seen by Hegel or Bismarck, that has the power and might and decision making, is the one that's deteriorating in the Arab world and even in the whole world. It is not a peculiar Arab phenomenon, however, it is the worst in our region. What happened in the past few years takes the region into projects, meaning that the Arab world is contradictory amongst itself and in need for a project of independence and momentum, and it is able to reach the hearts and minds of young men and young women who are attracted to other projects. So this should be a deeply rooted project and uses convincing power and soft power to bring about the momentum. Otherwise, We will not be able to compete with the Islamic State project nor other competitive projects, and the region is full of surprises. Some wars may seem like alternatives, but they are not more than calming the situation and bringing about temporary enthusiasm. The wars in our region, which could be successful in weakening some blocs and currents and states, is the same that makes the fighters and the ideologists of the future. Where should we begin, therefore? If we don't begin through dialogue openly, and we listen to Al-Ghannouchi today, so we should start by having an opinion and counter opinion and not having jails full of prisoners. And how are we to be victorious while we are confiscating the human rights of everybody? How can we become victorious if the goal is to replace despotism with another despotism and marginalizing a sect or a group for the sake of another sect or group? Exclusionism will not bring us back to life, and it will instead continue the exacerbation of the deterioration. We have to untie the shackles that are impeding the Arab world, and we see that evident. And thus, Arabism is somehow an imaginary idea, and we can see the fighting between Shias and Sunnis, where the Arab blood has become really so cheap. So Arabism seems to be an imaginary concept, but sometimes we see reforms and movements that come from the imagination. What allowed Daesh to establish a state in the heart of Iraq and Syria is so imaginary and beyond the ability to analyze that. Even if we think about the Muslim Brotherhood at that time, or the Arab nationalists or Ba'athists, that also has come from the womb of imagination. Did you see Zionism coming even from the exaggerated imagination? So the Arab mentality should also use the imagination and bring about ideas. Many times we have seen hopes coming out of repression and from different reservoirs. So if Daeshism is cross-border, and if terror and violence and extremism is trans-border also, and despotism is also crossing borders and has no geography, so why shouldn't Arabism and freedom and democracy and human rights also, with Islam accompanying it, to be also a trans-border phenomenon and to cross the borders and to be spilling over our region? We need the cultural imagination and political humanitarian imagination. The Arabs staying disintegrated also is reason for more intervention from the East and West, Iran and otherwise. Also, the absence of the Arab project with its humanitarian dimension has also brought about more crises.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shafiq. Mr. Waddah Khanfar, the president of the Orient Forum and also the member of the board of International Crises and also member of the Forum of World Editor. He started as the founder of the Huffington Post in 1915. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. May the peace of God be upon you. I do not believe in the idea of the end of history in politics. This idea was promoted at some time for 2 decades, if you remember. And also, I do not believe in the beginning of history too. That is why, when we discuss our situation in the Arab world and we look at it as the phase that started 5 years ago, and thus we have a problem with that period of time. Some politicians, they blame the Arab Spring that has led to the situation in which we live today. Up to today, I think that what is taking place in our Arab reality is a natural development, inevitable, which is continuous, not disrupted. We cannot retreat or try to avoid this kind of track. This is a reality that we're going to continue in. What do I mean? I mean that we live a kind of a civilizational circle or circuits. It hasn't started in 2011. It hasn't started in 1948 after the fall of Palestine. It didn't even start since Sykes-Picot. For hundreds of years, we have been within a certain kind of conflict or crisis that includes a number of components, international, political, and cultural, and so on and so forth, that have led to a number of developments. And Sykes-Picot was a landmark during that phase, the occupation of Palestine in 1948. This is another landmark. The wars that came after with the Israelis, this was another component, and also the independence of the Arab states, and so many components that are real, they are realistic, and they are the outcome of this reality. And we cannot say that we shouldn't have done so. These things have taken place. And if scholars do not find a way of going back to the past, we have to try to accept the past, not necessarily to glorify the past. On the contrary, there are positive aspects and negative aspects, but we are heading towards one path. We have been going through that path by what is called the Arab Revolution, the Arab Spring, chaos, name it, whatever it is named. This is not the end of history, nor is it the beginning of history. We are in a continuum, and this is the track, this is a path that we cannot retreat from. What I can say here in my diagnosis that we have reached a point in which there is an acceleration of events, such a point the most important component of which is the human being. So what I see is that the human being, the Arab or Middle Eastern or all other people in the world, are no longer the same. Our children are no longer as we used to be, nor the coming generation is going to be as our generation was. There is new ideas, new kind of awareness and consciousness. There is a feeling from the part of the individual that now he or she owns an authority. Our generation did not own such kind of authority or power. Now we all believe that we can do something, whether this is a reality or an illusion. We can transfer our ideas to other circles, much larger circles. That means that the power of the individual is much larger than before. And from the components of this reality too, we have seen a regression of these kind of ideas and political components as it was in the past decades or maybe thousands of years. There is something new that is growing now, that the kind of horizontal communication can transfer ideas and powers more than kind of pyramid-like forms or networks. So we have networks of communication have led to phenomena such as Daesh and so on and so forth. So the old molds are collapsing, and these old molds should be replaced by new molds. We should not stick to them and start crying about them. Yes, we are allowed, as part of poetry or art, maybe try to praise the past and talk about nostalgia, about the old past, but it is not allowed for a strategic thinker or for a politician or whoever is thinking about the future of this nation cannot talk about the past as a model that should be retrieved. It has ended. The whole past has ended. And history is moving towards the future and not towards the past. That is why we have to reconcile with this idea. And I'm saying this not only to politicians, but also to intellectuals, to thinkers, to scholars, and also the leaders of opinion. Our models, most of them are historical. We are trying to retrieve this beautiful past in a future which is different in terms of events, incidents, and reality, tools, and philosophies. And this is one of the main reasons of our failure. The past can be beautiful, but its beauty does not justify its retrieval. That is why we have to think about a much more beautiful future. And this is something that should be instilled in our minds. The past should be out of the equation. We have to give the floor and the space for the new to see birth, because we do not want to keep the current demon so as not to get a worse demon or a worse kind of devil to come. We need to move towards the future. We need to be trustworthy and trustful in our steps towards the future. We should alleviate any kind of disintegration that we might fall in, or conflicts and civil conflicts. And once again, I say this is a normal path. We have gone through such a path, and people in their revolutions have gone through these paths. We should not be destabilized or lose our balance. And we have to be hopeful that the future is better than the present, better than the past. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves frozen, static, enclosed in a historical situation that would not be able to liberate us. We'll find ourselves straitjacketed in that situation. The last point that I would like to talk about, and which is methodological and very important, in our current reality, due to this destabilized situation, and which is a normal situation, and we hope that we're going to be able to pass this situation very fast. Those who do not have a strategic depth on a real position have become important and active, and those who are active are no longer strategic. This is a great problem that we are facing in the Arab world. If we look at the system that we have in the Middle East, the strategically deep systems are not active, and the active systems do not have any strategies. We have a dynamism, but this dynamism doesn't lead to any fruitful results. The reason is that our governments, our leaderships in this world are part of the past that should have ended in order to move into the new, to celebrate the new. But when the new came, or wasn't able to be born, we feel that we live in the intensive care state. So there are so many beautiful things are taking place. There are so many meetings taking place, but the strategic value is very weak, because themselves they are very weak. The DNA, the genes of such kind of meetings are very weak. They cannot come up with ideas about the future. Even our leaders, even partisan leaders, and even intellectual leaders do not have a kind of a futuristic imagination. They have dreams of the past. They hold very tight to the present. That is why we are moving in this vicious circle. I would like our youth, our intellectuals, to move forward, to put aside the heritage of the past and be committed to the present for a better imagination. Let me tell you, whatever we imagine, the future is going to be better than this present. So why do we fear continuing towards the future and try? And sometimes we fall in mistakes, but we're going to learn, as many other nations have learned, and they have moved forward with their ideas towards the future. We cannot politically change unless we change intellectually. These intellectual molds, they were excellent at their moment or at their time. and it was a production for a good interaction between reality and ideology and intellect of that particular time. Nobody can say it is good or bad, but that was, but it is not going to be for the future. What is coming is not going to hold the ideology of the past. It is not going to be as restrictive as the commitment of the ideology of the past was. We need to think of new models and new molds. The idea of revival, the idea of reform, of revival of Arabism, of Islamic thought. We need we need to migrate from one model, intellectual model, to another intellectual model with other tools, whose title is Looking into the Future. If we are Islamists, we see that Islam resides in the future. If we are leftists, we see that our interest in our alliance with the values of social justice. Let's move from this straitjacketed mold into a much wider and spacious mold, which is belonging to the future and being optimistic about the future. Thank you very much.
Mr. Waddah, you described to us the reality that we live and the way that we should think according to in order to get rid of our reality, but you did not give us the concept as to the consequences. Maybe we save that to the Q&A session. Thank you anyway, Mr. Waddah Khanfar. Now we move on to Mr. Abdul Wahab Badr Khan, who is an author and political analyst. Mr. Abdul Wahab started his life in press and journalism in 1973 at An-Nahar, a Lebanese newspaper. He worked in An-Nahar Arabic magazine, and at the end of 1988 he went to London and moved to Al-Hayat newspaper, where he became deputy editor-in-chief. In the meantime, he was a commentator. You have the floor, Mr. Badr Khan. Thank you so much. Actually, speaking about the future is logical, yet how can we imagine the future? Please, if you come closer to the mic. Is this better? Yes, indeed. And as a journalist, I like to stay near to what is happening on the ground, and there are a lot of indications pointing to the future, the near future. However, the far future, I don't think that currently we are unable to visualize it, because we are unable to visualize our Arab region. How will it be during the coming years? And the crises going in the Middle East indicate risks and threats. First of all, the geographical entities as they are will not be united. Also, the impossibility of cohabitation within societies. Also, the impossibility of restoring internal and stability and security, and restoring the institutionalized work. This situation has called for requests. First of all, we have seen external intervention to end the conflicts which have become civil wars and wars by proxy for the benefit of those countries that call themselves stakeholders. Also, security arrangements that the international community is not any longer enthused to resolve, maybe because of the nature of the civil wars or because of their being intertwined, especially because of the existence of terror groups such as Daesh or ISIS. We are justifiably afraid now of the risks of division and disintegration which the geography of the beleaguered countries is facing. So internally we were unable to resolve the issues, and the Arab prospect, tried in Syria and it did not go on, and in Yemen it was completely absent. And regionally speaking, maybe Turkey, for example, was busy, too busy, or they were unable to bring about progress. The international community did not work seriously to find the right ways to deal with the crises and have committed mistakes, among them that they left the crises to be long and pushed the crises intentionally or unintentionally away from consensual agreements. Also, they have allowed the emergence of terror groups, and Syria, Iraq, and Libya are examples to that. Also, the international community now is using this terror as a pretext until Daesh has become semi-legal pretext for international interventions and the reason to pressure all parties to bring about political solutions. And because of the difficulty of the crises and their complexities and the speed of the Western countries working on these crises, Western countries find that it is better for their own interests to tackle the issues of federalism and division as worthy issues. And now the Middle East is like a very exhausted prey looking for the predator to come and eat it up. And thus, we always cite the status quo imposed by wars in order to bring about solutions that they should be permanent. The issue of Syria, for example, the Americans and the Russians are the ones who try to reach an agreement among them about its destiny and fate. And if they were able to agree, it is not assured that it will be good for the benefit of the Syrians people or Syria. The other model we're witnessing now is that the international forces are the ones who impose a government on two conflicting parties in Libya under the pretext of terror and Daesh again. For Iraq, none of us believes that this country will still remain united because there is an infiltration by Iran through social fabric, and also there is American Iranian collusion that we can see embodied in more than one place, and liberating Mosul will be a litmus test for this collusion by both sides. The Arab intervention in Yemen maybe has reduced the risks of division, and I say if there was a return to institutionalization of the division between North and South, then it could happen after the silencing of the bullets and the cannons and the tanks after reaching an agreement between the warring factions. And what is being prepared for Syria by the Americans and the Russians could also affect the geography of Lebanon. When that happens, it will be a confirmation of something dangerous, is that the two superpowers take Iran and its interests as a priority over any interest of the Arabs. And maybe these negative possibilities would take us as Arabs to the mother issue of all issues, which is the Palestinian cause, in which we were unable to impose respecting of our interest neither in peace nor in war, and the international scenarios are still neglecting the Arabs, marginalizing them and preventing them from being a regional power. And the fragility of the Arab countries in the middle of last century was an opportunity to implant Israel in the heart of the Middle East. Then the Cold War circumstances have contributed also in instilling the existence of Israel and helping it to expand aggressively with total enmity to the region. And unfortunately, the transformations taking place now aim to get rid of the Palestinian issue, and we can see also what is happening in the Arab world strategically and in terms of the sovereignty and the emotions that is likely to even deteriorate further. And in light of fixing up the fractions now through uh, bargaining taking place by the superpowers, that leaves us to not realize in what Arab world we live or what Arab world will be born out of these transformations, because there is lack of Arab collective thinking to restore the solutions and the peace in the region. And we don't know even who is more interested in bringing about a vision for future solutions. No doubt that what we are missing now is an Arab answer as to how to resist the risks. And we see that the Arabs are still being lost, and it is said because of the withdrawal of the US from the region, as if the Americans' concern with the region hasn't led to that loss. It has even led to destabilizing the Arab official regime or system. We have, therefore, to say that the Arab summits or Arab conferences really are of no benefit, because we don't have a leadership and we don't have an answer as to how to resolve these strategic crises. And maybe what has deepened even this loss is that there isn't awareness in the Arab region to the sabotage threat. And we can see that clearly in the sectarian strife or destabilizing the countries and the states in Syria and Iraq and Yemen, where it has exceeded the threat posed by Israel. I say, by way of conclusion, what distracts any insight into the future is that the Arabs are not the makers of the future nor effective partners in manufacturing it, but they will not improve their role if they suffice to just being bystanders while the Russians and the Americans are scrambling to protect Iran and Israel and deal with Turkey, so that there will be custodianship by all those over the Arab region. Yes, we are not living the end of the Arab region nor the end of history, but there is a deep need to review our issues and status by the elites and the liberals and the Islamists, specifically the Islamists, because in the last few years they were focused on and all the spotlights were directed to them, but they failed, unfortunately. And this general failure that we see is our responsibility collectively, with no doubt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Wahab. Now I would like to give the floor to Mohammed Al-Mukhtar Al-Shinqiti, Professor of Political Ethics in Kyle, Qatar Institute, faculty, and also the Faculty of Islamic Studies. His books have been translated into different languages. Dr. Mohammed Al-Mukhtar Al-Shinqiti, maybe you're going to try to answer the question. Many agree that there are so many paths and there isn't one clear path for the future. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, thank you, Salma. Thank you to the audience in the Al Jazeera forum. I think there is no need to be pessimistic if we put things into context, the historical context. There is a link between freedom and civil wars historically. So we are living the civil war that preceded freedom. You're not going to move into freedom from despotism unless you go into a dismantlement before you go into a period of rebuilding or restructuring. That is why we have to learn from the paths of other human beings in this human paths that have started 3 centuries ago from 1866 and from the French Revolution also. So we need to move from phases. And I think that the peoples have changed. And if the people change, the change of politics is a matter of time only. And that the wars that are taking place today, they accelerate the movement of history or the transition. And as historians say, that wars accelerate the movement of history. But our situation is quite particular. We are a people that like what is traditional and do not want to get something new. We do not want to emulate the others, but we have not been innovative when it comes to our path. We are not sitting in between these two things. We neither like to emulate others, nor do we want to be innovative for the future. But we are a nascent nation which is strong, and its people want to make concessions, and this is very important indeed. With the logic of history, if we find a people that is willing to make concessions, this is a state that it is in the beginning of its civilization. So you have to gauge that on the basis of how you are willing to make concessions or not willing to make concessions. There are a number of parameters when it comes to the tracks that are going to be followed in our region. The Arab Revolution, secondly, the role of Turkey, after that, the European awakening, fourth, the Iranian will and the Iranian arrogance. So either people and rulers in our countries are going to move into self-reconciliation or a kind of a defensive or protective reform. We have tried the revolutions and the counter-revolutions in the last 5 years, but we have not tried the third path. There is a loophole in this closed circle or dead end, which is a kind of a protective kind in order to alleviate the pain of transition, as Mr. Ballah had said. And this is our hope. We should not lose hope. And there are some examples of success, whether Tunisia, which is a republic that has moved towards democracy, and Morocco, a monarchy which has adopted kind of protective reform. So the image is not very bleak. As for the Turkish role, Turkey is a strong nucleus of this ummah. It is a nascent, strong state that is on the crossroad of different continents, and it is living a development and a new historical path. They have moved into self-discovery and building bridges with other civilizations, and we do share with the Turks this Islamic civilization. Turkey today is a central state, and its role in the region is pivotal. And I think that the aims to close the Arab portal on, the closing of the Arab-Turkish border through Syria and other attempts are not only inimical to Turkey, but also inimical to the Arabs, because this is going to close this kind of Arab strategic expansion, and Arabs should not accept that, and they should not leave Turkey as a strategic partner and as a gateway to Europe. Graham Fuller, one of the American strategists, said that Turkey sees itself as a bridge between the West and the Arab Islamic, but the West. They see it as a barrier between itself and the Islamic world. So here we see the difference between the bridge and the dam. It should be solved in favor of the bridge. This is the first time that Turkish people are going to be, or Turkish citizens are going to be allowed to enter the European Union without an entry visa. The third component, which is the European awakening, the most important thing that Europeans should understand, they should understand the importance of the world of the Mediterranean. As the French author Baudelaire said, and the Arab world is a Mediterranean phenomenon, and the southern bank is not going to stay unstable, and the northern bank is going to stay stable. And what has taken place in Paris is one indicator. So they have to get rid of this kind of selfishness and understand the unity of this Mediterranean area, and that they should understand that the southern bank is part of the people of the Mediterranean, and that they are interrelated. And I hope that this is going to happen, and that's not going to be far from achievement. The fourth thing is the Iranian role. We have seen the arrogance of the Iranians, the imperial arrogance, and Iran could have been one of the most winners in the Arab Spring, similar to Russia. Many of the revolutions were as a result of animosity to Iran, with the exception of al-Assad. But the arrogance of Iran has made it move into another path. That is why Iran should be downsized in that respect, whether we like it or not. I do believe very deeply that there is no substitute to coexistence between Arabs and Persians, between Sunnis and Shiites, but there is no coexistence without downsizing its expansion in the Arab world, because coexistence in the absence of justice is not a good coexistence. As for the American-Russian competition, the Americans, they have read the Arab Spring superficially, and they thought it was a transient kind of movement that can be undermined by repression and distortion, similar to what took place in Algeria. They didn't know that this is a phenomenon that has grown and that cannot be undermined. They didn't give war a chance, as Richard Litwack has said. Why wouldn't you give them a chance? And after that we see. But now it is no longer possible to contain this problem, this bloody situation in one particular area. The war is spilling over, and they have to start recalculating and revisiting their matter. The Americans and the Russians, they don't want to be embroiled in the situation, and maybe the withdrawal of the Russians is one indicator to that. What the future of this region, we're going to see the limitation of the counter-revolution retreat, and we're going to see the expansion of Salafi jihadi movement from a local phenomenon into an international movement or phenomenon. I think they're going to lose structure and geography, and they're going to move into Al-Qaeda 10 years ago. But it is going to be much more fierce than Al-Qaeda because of their military competence, and due to the fact that they have so many nationalities, including European nationalities. and the Arab-Turkish rapprochement is going to be much more deeper in the future, and this is going to have a positive impact and role to play. This self-reconciliation and to liberate ourselves from this kind of division, whether it is secular Islamic division or Sunni Shia or nationalistic kind of divisions between Kurds and Arab. If we do not manage, or we were not able to deal with this multifarious kind of fabric, and when a person is only with one dimension, this deprives him of his humanity. So we cannot have a person or a human being of one dimension. We have to understand the different components of this deep civilization, and the Islamic civilization was built by so many nations, but the main pillars and the pioneering nations of this civilization were particularly three nations. So Arabs, the sword of Islam, and the Turks were the shield of Islam in defense, and the Persians were the pen of the Islamic civilization in its affluence. But unfortunately, there was separation. Although our civilization historically was not as multifarious as other civilizations were. It was no other civilization, sorry, was as multifarious as our civilization was. So Ilya Abu Madi said, a poet who talked about failure in managing multifarious identities. And this poem is The Small Stone. It talks about a small stone in a large dam. This stone found that it has no value and that it should leave the dam. It doesn't find itself and is not appraised in that dam. And it had left, and the dam collapsed. Ilya Abu Madi said, so he's reciting some poetry talking about Ilya Abu Madi and the dam that had collapsed as a result of this stone.
And so the dam, so solidly built, and the water looks like the desert. Indeed, a poetic picture for a sleeping city that is so quiet and calm, that Monin has come complaining of blindness. What can you say anything about this world that you have no value in it? I am not to be as a stone to be built. I am not a land that keeps the water, nor am I a water that irrigates the beautiful gardens. I am just a stone, and I am humiliated. I have no beauty, no power. So let me get out of this existence and go peacefully. I hate to stay. And it fell from its own place, complaining from the earth and from the water. The dawn opened its eyes, and then the flooding has come and overtaken the white city. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shanqiti, for your optimism. We thank you indeed. And now we will tackle the concepts mentioned by the panelists. In addition to taking questions from the audience, we begin on this side. Please state your name and to stand up so we can see you, and to have a direct question to one of the panelists. This gentleman here. Zakaria Matar, economic advisor. I appreciate the utopian aspect of Shanqiti and Al Ghabra, there are two main lines drawing the future. The Arab world being tailor made for the benefits of the Zionist entity, that is by the US. The US is moving the world according to the interests of the Zionist entity to guarantee the safety and security of Israel. The other element, which is like the elephant in the room, is oil. If the US is self-sufficient with oil, then the offshore exploration, by the way, there is a conference for the next 3 days about that, then Shell and the US would leave the region. Those phenomenon, Daesh and corruption, all of these are just symptoms of the foreign intervention. If the US leaves the region, everything will change. And then it will abandon the tyrants that it supports. And if Israel, if we were able to break its demands, then there will be a change of everything that's happening. All these are symptoms. The question is directed to whom, please? I'm not having a question, just commenting. Well, we hope that there will be questions directed to the panelists. Hawas from Al Jazeera Studies Center. My question is to Dr. or Mr. Wadah Khanfar, speaking about what's happening as natural and that nations throughout their history go through strifes and internal wars and civil wars as a necessity to move toward democracy and free societies. My question is about different experiences where there are revolutions that have erupted, but there wasn't any infighting in them and they were successful. For example, the Iranian Revolution was a white revolution, and despite all the conspiracies against it, Al-Khomeini, with his cleverness, succeeded. So why Iran succeeds and we don't? And we say this is natural. Also, the colorful revolutions, why did they succeed and we failed if this is natural and normal? Also, in the future, if we don't say to anyone who makes a mistake, you are mistaken and you should be held responsible, isn't that the guarantee for no repeating of the mistakes, that we give carte blanche forgiveness for those who commit mistakes? So this will be repeated throughout history. Thank you, Mr. Al-Hawas. Rawa, you go ahead, Rawa. I will ask you to comment first and then we'll have a question. First of all, I would beg to differ about the end of history. When Fukuyama spoke about the end of history, in my personal opinion, and he explained that also, that it is the end of the conflicts by the superpowers directly. That's why I wanted to clarify this difference, because this is what we should realize when we look to the future and when the confrontation between us and those superpowers end, because they will be on a different land. This is what we see nowadays here. The issue by Dr. Al-Ghabra and Mr. Khanfar is that what do we need? And for the youth full of awareness, I speak as one of those youth who are seeking awareness, but they are fought by the regimes who say we are traitors. If we have a civil society organization, they say it's financed from outside by foreign sources. If we criticize Islam, they say you are infidels. And so in light of these systems followed by those regimes, made the majority stand on the side of the regime when the regime attacks the youth when they move a slightest move. Good evening. Question to Mr. Shanqiti, Dr. Shanqiti. I hope that you have listened to what Mr. Badr Khan and Khanfar said. You wouldn't have fallen in this discrepancy to describe the courage that they are the barrier between the Arabs and Turkey, don't you think that after the Kurds have formed their geography even slightly and formed a military force, an economic force, even slightly speaking, that they will not stand still, and there are 40 million people in that region and you haven't even calculated them and taken them into consideration like you took to consideration the story of the small stone in your poetry. Don't you think that Iran is expanding in the region after there is a new nation under the banner of Shiites? Because Shiites in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon see that they are nearer to Iran and not to the Arab society. So I hope that the research would be realistic without creating new enmity in the region, because we see now that the Kurds now are the nearest to the Arabs. And the example on that is that all the refugees who were rejected by Baghdad and they lived in Kurdistan in dignity are witness to that. Thank you. We will have a second round, but now let's give an opportunity to the panelists. Dr. Shafiq, there was a question to you from Rawa, who spoke about youth participation and that they are being blamed, even though they carried out the revolution. And you spoke saying that Daesh or ISIS attracts a lot of youth at a time when they wanted to participate, but they were neglected as a youth, that is, especially when the revolutions failed in several places. Our question is a good one. There is a problem that the youth face in the Arab countries in terms of their ability to organize and to influence, and many other dimensions as well. The Arab youth took to the streets in 2011 in light of peaceful revolutions, if you will, but after that, the peaceful door was shut in their faces, and now there is an attempt to restore the Arab state pre-2011. I think this is impossible to restore that time. Pre-2011 will not be restored. We are reaping the result of what has been built during the last 4 or 5 decades. So the Arab youth has emerged, but in my opinion, they are the majority, but they will not go back to their homes. This is a phenomenon. He is seeking to establish projects. So when they find this way or that one, then they will be attracted either to extremism. Thousands of Arab youth participate with Al-Qaeda or ISIS in their wars, and there's more to come. So if we don't call the Arab youth to a humanitarian democratic project where they will be able to use their energies proficiently and beneficially in society, then extremism will become more exacerbated in the Arab region. I know the meaning of state changes. The former state always owned all sources of power. It had the power and the policy at the same time. Today, the state has its policy. It allows, it rejects, bans, issues laws, but it doesn't have the power. The power lies elsewhere. And as long as a state acts as if it owns power, then we are digging a hole that will increase extremism. This is not an Arab state, but an international state where it makes the presidents, prime ministers, and the leaders and everybody different from the past. There are new players, new energies, social media. Power has moved elsewhere, therefore. If we don't recognize and admit that, then you cannot say, I want to organize myself. So allowing peaceful work and peaceful expression is the priority, because in lack of a protest, lack of writing, violence will spread. But dealing with peaceful expression through violence or as violence will bring about more violence in the middle of the youth. And when Mr. Khanfar discussed this issue, he agrees with you. Mr. Khanfar, what about the role of the youth and their participation? And you gave advice, and you said that they have power contrary to the past. Now with social media, they have power. Also another question from Mr. Taqiyya, who spoke about successful models such as the revolution in Iran and other colorful, so to speak, revolutions. And the question was, why don't we tell a person who commits a mistake, you committed a mistake? And you said also we have to reconcile with the past. Does that mean to look the other way at all the mistakes? I did not say that, but anyway, what I meant by reconciling with the past is that we put the past in its own path and its own position. It is not something that we can restore, for one thing, nor we can stay captive to it and live with its ghosts. So leave it like it is, just like we reconcile with the future. We put the future in its own position and in its own place, and we hope to reach it. Also, the intellectual system I'm calling for is not out of leisure. I believe that any intellectual system is like a creature that becomes old and becomes sick, just like a human being. That's why Fukuyama spoke about the end of history. He said that the intellectual international conflict ended by the winning of liberal capitalism. He made a mistake, because indeed capital liberalism in the West is an entity that grows and becomes old and senile and could become sick and could also give birth to sons and grandsons. So we should not stay captive to one intellectual paradigm. At the end of the day, these are not holy. These are just product of man and in his dealing with reality. This is the contact between knowledge and reality. If we need a new intellectual system, then you fall in the trap of a past that is being sustained, but it is not suitable for the future. So we come to a dead end. We know that modern Europe came after 30 years of civil wars, where 1 out of 3 was killed. 1/3 of the population of Europe were killed during 30 years of rather religious war between the Protestants and the Catholics. The 17th century was a bloody one, but is an embodiment of what happened because we saw 30 years of civil war, and then the Enlightenment and modernity came about, and then the French Revolution after a century. So the path of history usually cannot stay immersed in a bloody time, which is exceptional no matter how much we kill one another, Sunnis, Shiites, Arab, Kurds, Muslims, Christians. We will reach the conclusion reached by the Europeans after the killing of one-third of the Europeans by saying there's no use. There must be the existence of Protestants and Catholics, French and Germans, so we have to sit down and we have to agree. World War I and II also example on that when we saw 100 million people killed during World War I and ended with the Second World War. And what happened in World War II, and this is a lesson we learned, that immediately after the war, by 1 year, exactly, the Marshall Plan, which was given to restore and rebuild Europe, included in its goals that there should be work to build a European one system. Imagine, the Germans killed everybody and everybody killed the Germans, and still Paris is destroyed, Berlin is demolished, and the buildings in London are razed to the ground, and yet those who gather to rebuild Europe say that the strategic goal is to have united Europe, meaning the failure of the bloody war for the benefit of reconciliation. So what's happening between us today is so dangerous and damaging, but we should not say that this should be continuing, that no matter what we do, we should sit down and say the Arabs will remain, the Turks should remain, the Shiites should remain, the Persians should remain. So I say 10 to 15 years from now, if we want to reach political stability and economic prosperity, it is indeed inevitable that the system should not be sectarian, racial, or national. The regime that should be formed in the region is a practical one that provides economic integration and prosperity between the nations in the region, where everybody celebrates their race and nationality, but that should remain in an individual and societal, but not as a political identity that is formed through political models. So, not to be selfish.
Is this going to be achieved within the plans that are demarcated today, or is it going to be within newly demarcated plans or maps? Sykes and Pico are not the best strategists. These people, by chance, sat together. There was a vacuum, there was a destruction, and they succeeded, but this cannot be retrieved. I do not say that the West can divide us. They cannot do that. We can divide ourselves if we agree that this is better for us. This European West that lives in a situation of economic collapse, or Europe that we see today will not be the same after 15 years. After 15 years, they have a big problem, and maybe they cannot overcome their difficulties. You see the calls from Trump. Forget Trump. Yesterday, Trump said that we should withdraw from NATO and so on and so forth. But this is a kind of a tendency. This is not an issue of Trump and Obama. Obama practically is withdrawing. He's leading the United States into a state of isolation because he thinks in the interest of his country. And this region is going to be left gradually alone. And this is a positive opportunity and not negative. It remains, at the beginning, we think that it is going to be difficult, but it is not going to be difficult. We're going to be left alone. We're going to feel that we are orphans, but we should sit together. People, reasonable people, should sit together. Turkey with Iran, with the Arab states, they should sit together. The Kurds and the Arabs, the Persians should sit together in order to agree on a security and economic system in which the interests should be paramount, the economic paramount, and also we should forget about sectarian issues for the continuation in this stability. That is why the key to all these things is that the great powers should leave this region, and I see that very future. Russia is not going to stay Russia. Russia is also facing economic difficulties, and it is not better than what it used to be. And also the United States is going to move towards a kind of a partial isolation, and also Europe should move into strategic change and economic change. So we're going to fight a lot, and after that we're going to reconcile and then start loving each other. What you're saying, Mr. Waddah, I would like to take what you said now to Mr. Badr Khan. Can we build that on the basis of having a partnership with Iran, with the presence of the Israelis that want the wars to lead to the division of the region on religious sectarian basis? There was a question to Mr. Mukhtar al-Shanqiti, Mohammed Mukhtar al-Shanqiti. Can you answer my question about the Turkish component, Kurdish, the Kurdish component? Thank you very much. I would like to thank the point that you referred to. I was not able to give you tangible examples. Otherwise, I would have talked about Kurds, which are more important than the small stones. I am one of the people who defend the rights of Kurds and being just to them and fair to them. And my writings hold testimony to that. I always said that historically, in some point in history, the history of this region, they were cements that consolidated the different components. And I'm talking about the wars, the Crusade Wars. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was a Kurd who was a person who united a ummah, a nation. Racially, he was a Kurd. Culturally, he was an Arab, and politically was a Turk. He united the whole nation in one person in a very important era. He knew the traditions of Arabs, and Ibn Shaddad said that he knew about poetry and about other Arab things, and he used to consider himself a Turk, and he was very proud to be so, as it was said by historians when Ibn Dahan praised him. He praised Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, and he said, this man is the one who says, do you praise the Turks? Do you want them to be praised? And the Turks do not use poetry as we do. So he gave him 100 dinars because he felt jealous about the dignity of the Turks. He was part of the Turkish elite. At the same time, nobody can deny his Kurd lineage or ancestry. So giving up any of those components, Persian, Berber, Amazighi, or Arab, is going to lead to the collapse of the Great Dam. What I wanted to say, as expressed by Ilya Abu Madi in his poetic language, if we give up one small stone, this is going to lead to the collapse of the Great Dam. There is a difference between what the Kurds want for themselves and what the Americans want for the Kurds. And here there is a difference. I do not agree that the Kurds should become a dam between Syria and the Arab world, and that the presence of the Kurds in Qamishli and Hasaka should expand, as some militias are trying, until they reach the far northwest and ignore Turkey itself and its expansion towards the Arab world. These are partial issues that we can politically disagree on, but this does not deny the importance of the Kurds and their history in the region. And I was the first to criticize the partial culture of Arabs against the Kurds, and I wrote about that in my book, and I talked about the popular imagination in Arab literature and their negative view vis-à-vis Kurds. This is part of the past that we should not deal with. And also what I mentioned in Taj al-Zabidi, Maddat al-Arus, some people say that Kurds come from jinnis, and some of them are half jinnis and the other half is human. And then he says, each Kurd is quarter is a jinni. So there is some popular folklore that has an impact on the stereotypes that we have. I do not care about the stereotypes of the Americans, how they look at Muslims. What interests me is how Arabs look at Kurds and how Kurds look at Arabs and Turks at Arabs and vice versa. This is what interests me academically, because this is the most important for us to be able to build a common identity, multifarious, pluralistic. We need to go back to overcome all these racial and cultural partialities and try to build on human dignity as a human being, and also to build on a history of coexistence on which Al-Jahid wrote, and also Abu al-Jawzi wrote about إزالة الغبش عن فضائل السودان والغبش, and other books have been written. So these are the merits of the Kurds.
Thank you, Dr. Shanqiti. Mr. Badr Khan, before we take another round of questions, please, you can go ahead and answer. If you don't remember the question, it is about how could there be cooperation between the Arabs and Iran and Turkey in light of the big strategic problem in the region, which is the existence of Israel and its occupation of Arab lands. Any thinking of an Iranian-Arab cooperation, it has to impose on Iran to come off its tree and to give up its hegemony and its control of Arab capitals, like it itself says. And this will not happen in the near future, in my opinion. What happened practically, if we were to have a true statistical analysis of the harms and damages that has befallen the Arab world because of the intervention of Iran in Syria and in Iraq specifically, we will find that the list is long, maybe, than what has happened between the Arabs and Israel, be it in terms of the human beings who have been killed, the victims, and destabilizing those Arab states, and also the social status that it has fabricated in those countries, and because of which we say now it is impossible now to coexist because of that. So the journey is rather long about the possibility of cooperating with Iran. But I think generally speaking in the Arab world there is rejection of the issue of Sunni and Shi'i. So the issue is between states. There are some who want cooperation and rapprochement between the Arabs and the Persians. For Turkey, Turkey now that we see had a big project for openness with the Arabs, but I think that the Syrian crisis is what has become as a barrier. So the Israeli problem still remains as a big problem. So the question is, does the US want to withdraw from the Middle East, and what will it do in vis-a-vis Israel? If Israel still considers itself to be threatened, and if it were to be abandoned, then the Arab region will swallow it, so to speak. So if there are settlements to be done regionally or projects to be conducted regionally with international guarantees and with support from the region, then that should include a resolution of the Palestinian cause to be satisfactory to the Palestinian people and to be appropriate also to guarantee the respect of the Palestinians' rights. Otherwise, the region will still remain in turmoil. And anyway, nobody expects that any surprises will take place that would change the nature of the region from turmoil into peace and stability in the near future. This is left to the birth pangs of what is happening now, which will take years in my view. Thank you. Now we take more questions. One question only. I promised you. Everybody is optimistic. Please identify yourself. Brahim Junaid from Hawiyati Center from Kuala Lumpur. Everybody is optimistic and looking forward to a new transformation. But the question is where to start. In the 18th century, there was a theory in sociology which is being implemented now. We are in the age of masters who have technology, economy, production, arms, policy. So the question is where to start. No doubt that the beginning is the true national identity. We all look for a project of Arab national identity that preserves the nation state identity. But where to start? Iran has 9 centers specializing in identity. One works for the issue of identity specifically as advisory to the regime. Israel is the same way, but we don't even have one. Some Arab countries are threatened not to be on the map, but they are not paying attention. Dr. Shanqiti, Mr. Khanfar, if the states don't pay attention to that, then who will take an initiative to support the identity of the Arab? If this project existed prior to the Arab Spring, it would have been a prevention of the stumbling that has taken place afterward. So, who is responsible for the beginning and to have such project for a nation state and that preserves for this nation its identity, especially that they are capable of having an identity. They have one faith, one language, one culture. Thank you.
I would like to start with Mr. Waddah. So I am not one of the supporters of the nation states in our Arab world, the nation state in most cases. Maybe there are some exceptions, which is Egypt, which has different components. The nation state was artificial. It was not a real one. It didn't have the capability to continue and to stay. And the good news that some countries are not going to be on the map. Why not? Who says that we are for the sanctity of this sacredness, sorry, of this map? It is not part of the sacredness that should be given to the land or to a place. At the end of the day, borders should serve stability and sovereignty that we can deal with as human beings. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, in the borders that we have today, we can do so many things. We can stay with these borders, but at the same time, the borders can lose their roles as dams. The roles in Europe are there on the map, and people move from one country to another without feeling that they are facing dams preventing the movement of ideas, goods, and people. And this is what we're calling for. If you like to have borders, let's love borders and continue in that way. If there are people who want what is beyond the borders, the Middle Eastern entity, Arab entity, it is beautiful. All of these things can be achieved altogether, but we do not want the things to be with certain sacredness. No, we want them to be functional. I lived a period of time when we used to say that Jordan first, Palestine first, Egypt first. Each one of us failed what can happen in a larger framework. And I think patriotism is used as a cover of failure, helplessness, or the absence of being able to imagine the future, or as dictatorship fear. And we start having this kind of spirit of patriotism, or even sometimes chauvinism. We do define ourselves not to be part of an Islamic system or global system. We do define ourselves as being in contradiction to another system. That is why they were fabricated identities for them to say, since I am present, and this justifies the borders. That is why you have to follow us, and we are different from others. That is why we have to be distinct from others. Patriotism is a beautiful kind of concept. We can write poetry about it, we can celebrate it, but this is not going to lead to isolation or to animosity towards others. And we try to define ourselves as being an entity that is in contradiction to another entity. We can complement even the global vision. That's how we should be. I think we have to rehabilitate our terminology. We have to redefine the terminology, and it has to be in a new framework that will lead us to the spirit of the age. Thank you very much. Dr. Mohammed, do we really need such centers that would do research and seek to know identity? This is what Dr. Waddah talked about. Thank you very much. I think the most important identity is human identity and should be the starting point. What is beyond that, these are things that will remain contentious. I think it is the human being and the dignity of the human being. If we look into the history of contemporary history, we find that there are two schools, the school of identity and the school of renaissance. Some people want to reach a state of renaissance, and some others who want to protect the self and keep encapsulated within the self. I think we have to move into a kind of a renaissance state, and when we talk about one identity, there isn't one identity, there are multifarious identities, as I mentioned before. And these multifarious identities are based on the fact that human beings are compounded and that nations are not pure nations from a sectarian perspective or racial perspectives. These are illusions that prevailed in the 19th century. I'm not a patriotic or nationalistic person. I think that human beings are much more complex than that. Nation or homeland, it is a number of people that share duties and rights. What is beyond that is not part of identity. Yes, we need to have unity, but unity not necessarily should be integral. It can be coordinative. It can be unity of positions or unity of will, not necessarily a political unity. And forms of unity, Malik bin Nabi, he talks about the unity of the Islamic world. He talks about the Commonwealth, Islamic Commonwealth. He said that the Islamic world is not one world. There are 5 or 6 Islamic worlds in this world. If we look into the objective circumstances, we have an Arab Islamic world, we have African Islamic world, Indian Islamic world, Turkish Islamic world. We have to take into account these particularities, and after that we can have a kind of a coordination relationship. In conclusion, I do not very much fear for the identity. I fear weakness and infiltration, despotism and corruption. This is what we fear. We need more effectiveness than identity. As Mr. Waddah said, borders are good as long as they are not, or they do not become dams. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed al-Shanqiti. You had the last comment. Mr. Shafiq, you'll have the last word here. The clear problematic issue in 2011, the revolutions took place in the Arab countries and Arab regions. The Arab Spring, the Turkish situation is within a state, and it is established, it was established as an Ottoman Empire, and it has been transformed to a republic. And Iran is a particular situation also. But when we talk about the Arab world, the problem lies with the Arab world. The identity should not be a fanatic kind of identity. It should be a human identity, humanitarian identity. Arabs are not only those who have Arab genes, are all those who speak the Arabic language and all those who accepted to deal with the Arabic culture. It is a cultural case or phenomenon, and it is this phenomenon that makes the Arab world in this kind of issue. That is why finding a solution or a historical framework in order to get out of this quagmire within a kind of an Arab region that would strike a balance between what has been built in the past and what is coming in the future. Striking such balances is possible between borders and between geographies and between developments and human rights and the needs of the youth generation. This generation nation that aspires to so many things in the future, because we do not want our youth to keep immigrating and destroying their countries when they are upset and do not find ways out. There's so many things that would make us optimistic, but we need to have more boldness, more clarity. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you and thank all the guests for their participation in this forum, enriching this forum. Mr. Shafiq Gharbra, Mohammed Mukhtar Sharqiti, Mr. Mohammed Waddah Khanfar, and I would like to thank you very much for your participation. Please allow me to invite Dr. Salah ad-Din al-Zain, the director of Al Jazeera Center for Studies, to give the last word. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, I would like to thank our colleague Salma. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the Al Jazeera Forum in its 10th edition. This is a different edition compared to the other editions. We have encapsulated it in 4 sessions only. Al Jazeera, normally Al Jazeera forums, the previous editions comprised of 2 to 3 days, and we had parallel sessions, workshops, and discussions within lunch breaks. But this time, Al Jazeera Forum has been convened with other international events that have been convened and hosted by Al Jazeera. We had the IPI Congress, and we had also the Media World Summit. The different sessions took place yesterday and the day before, and the title of this forum is Regional and International Struggle in the Middle East, and the objective of such kind of title is to try to enhance the discussions about the situations taking place in the region, the day-to-day issues and transformations taking place in the region. We were keen to be provocative in the questions that should be posed for the different discussions to continue with the discussion in order to be insightful in their ideas that students, media outlets should benefit from. If we succeed in posing and letting you pose pivotal questions, so that would be the objective of the sessions that have been convened today. Ladies and gentlemen, before I start with the thanks, there are a number of issues that have been dealt with here in this hall and outside the hall. I would like to comment on them very quickly. There were a number of observations that not all opinions were represented. Al Jazeera is always proud that it is the banner or podium of the opinion and the other opinion, and representing a multifarious kind of opinions, and this enriches the public opinion. And this is what Al Jazeera always tries to achieve in all its media platforms, through its TV, online, and so forth, and so on and so forth. It is not going to be fair to say that Al Jazeera is not representative of all opinions from one session. We are keen in the different sessions of the forum to represent all opinions. If you go back to the discussions that took place last year, you will see the multifarious of presence and representation. Sometimes we cannot meet that in one forum. You have to look at the screens, the online website of Al Jazeera Center of Studies. This is something that we are keen to achieve. If there was a voice that was absent today, maybe it was present in previous sessions, or maybe it is going to be invited to future sessions. This is what we are keen to achieve, to have all these ideas represented in our sessions. There is another question, sorry. How can we summarize the outcome of these forums? These forums do not go up or come up, with recommendations or resolutions. This is an opportunity to open the scope for discussions that should be reiterated in other fora in order to deeply understand these issues. But maybe that there's not going to be a kind of final communique similar to other conferences, but our colleagues are going to publish video snippets and very soon we're going to summarize the discussions for them to be available to those who want to follow the discussions that took place. So the aim is not to have particular recommendations, but maybe to open the scope for a deeper understanding about what is taking place in this region. There were other questions, especially about the absence of certain people who have been mentioned in the agenda. Some of them did not attend. The main actors, the decision makers in the region, we always try to invite them and they respond to us, but we do understand that the developments that take place in the region sometimes influence their agendas. Some speakers whose name have been seen in the agenda but were not able to attend due to some circumstances. We do appreciate that, and we hope that you will be able to see them in coming sessions of the forum. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like, at the end of this forum, the 10th edition of this forum, I would like to extend my thanks and gratitude to the panelists in the different sessions and the moderators of the different sessions and the dear audience. Without your presence, we wouldn't have been to convene these sessions. That is why I would like to appreciate your presence. I would like also to thank the institutions of the state of Qatar who have helped us a great deal, especially the Ministry of Interior Department, especially in order to organize this forum. And I would like also to thank the different media outlets that have broadcast the sessions. I would like also to thank our colleagues in Al Jazeera Mubashir. I do not want to forget anybody of you. I would like also to thank my friends and colleagues in Al Jazeera. This work is not the outcome of the effort exerted by the employees of Al Jazeera Center for Studies. All employees of Al Jazeera Network have worked hard to have this forum out in the form that you see it. This is also the outcome of the sponsorship and support of the higher management. I would like to thank them, and we should not forget many people who work backstage. We should not forget them, the TV directors, the interpreters. Thank you so much for all your help. At the end, I hope and I wish all our guests who have come from outside Doha, wishing them a safe return home. And may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all.